Welcome everyone. Today we're in the first module of the course. We're talking about why systems thinking for sustainability. So we're going to paint a bit of a bigger picture of why this is of importance, why it's so relevant when trying to think about sustainable systems. So I think a lot of systems thinking, these ideas, this whole approach really starts with a recognition to the complexity of the challenges we face in the world. That's more generally, but specifically in the context of sustainability, it's a recognition that these challenges, climate change, water, food, circular economy, so on and so forth, are complex in nature. And there's no simple solution to such challenges. I don't think it's until we kind of come to that recognition that we'll really see the value of systems thinking and the importance of it. And that's really where this journey starts, I think, a recognition for the complexity of the challenges we face and that there is no simple solution. So this is a quote from Jeffrey Sachs, who's an economist and famous economist, development economist and sustainability thinker. So he says, that's really the aim of the study of sustainability, to understand the world and of course to help improve the world. And we need to get into the complexity. Any idea that there's one answer, one simple magic formula, one explanation, one force at work, we have to put that aside. We have to embrace complexity because we're talking about a complicated, interconnected set of relationships of a world economy that now spans all parts of the world and connects all people, all businesses, all technologies, flows of trade, finance, ideas, advertising, production systems, but also connects us with the physical earth in unprecedented ways. So I think that sums a lot of it up. We live in this new world of complexity in the 21st century, and these challenges that we face emerge out of that complexity, out of the complex systems that we've built over the past thousands of years, but particularly the past couple of decades with globalization and financialization, the expansion of population and cities around the world. And we live in a world of complex systems, really. That's how we organize and manage our economies. That's how we get things done. And they do a lot of great things for us, but they also create challenges also. When they aren't working very well, we get what we call wicked problems. Maybe you've heard of this term. Essentially, it's a complex challenge, and we can contrast those with simple ones. Simple ones, there's a problem, and then there can be a solution to that. For example, fixing the puncture on your car, or maybe a toothache or something. There's a specialist, an expert who can fix that for you. Wicked problems, the kind of environmental challenges we're talking about in this course, the really big ones that matter, they aren't like that at all. They look like this graphic on the right-hand side here. When you dig into them, you find that actually, whether you're talking about water or food or energy or whichever, if we take food, if you dig into that, you'll see, well, actually, it's connected to governance, it's connected to energy, it's connected to water, it's connected to cultural beliefs, it's connected to habits and education, media, design, definitely finance, so on and so forth. So that's the nature of wicked problems. They're interconnected, interdependent, and so forth. And you'll find that for all of these really big sustainability challenges we face: soil erosion, climate change, urban sprawl, water crisis, so on and so forth. There's many of them. These are wicked problems, and these are the characteristics of wicked problems that make them particularly difficult. And I guess with respect to this course, they make them unamenable to our traditional kind of linear approaches that we'll be talking about as we go along, and why we really need systems thinking. That's what this module is about. And we're trying to paint a picture of how the challenges we face are fundamentally complex. And when you're dealing with complexity, you need a different way of thinking to simpler systems. And that way of thinking is called systems thinking. And that's why we're really here. We're really interested in this stuff in the context of sustainability challenges. So some of the aspects of these wicked challenges or wicked problems, they're multidimensional. They have many dimensions, as we saw in that past graphic: social, economic, technological, environmental. Almost all of these challenges actually are constituted of a plethora, a variety, a diversity of different systems that are interrelated. Yet they're interconnected and interdependent. They span across traditional divides and departments and domains, and that's why we struggle with them a lot. Our industrial kind of silos don't really fit the nature of the problem here. So they're unstructured, they're open-ended. We can't really put the challenge into a box of a, you know, six-month program or something. It's ongoing. There's no known solution, so we've never really faced these kinds of problems before. We've never been in this situation before, so there's no kind of template, no kind of precedence as to how we'd go about fixing these problems. Like climate change, we'd never been in this situation. We'd never been on a planet with 8 billion people almost, or with depending upon an industrial infrastructure that's emitting carbon dioxide, that's accumulating and so forth. We've never had that kind of challenge before. It's unprecedented, and there's no known solution. There are multiple perspectives on the challenge, which is often a key aspect of this. Different people are looking at it in different ways. And that means there's a lack of kind of consensus about not just the solution, but even the nature of the problem. If we take something like politics in America, or the view of climate change in America, we'll know there's radically different perspectives on what that's about. So that too itself is quite challenging, which is unlike kind of simpler problems. When you have a puncture with your car, it's quite obvious what the problem is. No one's really going to be debating that too much. So that's wicked problems, that's complexity, that's the nature of what we're dealing with here. I'd say the most important aspect actually of wicked problems is that they're systemic. And that's really key to what we're talking about here. It's key to everything in this course. The problem is not a single part of the system. It is actually the system itself. The way it's organized, the way we're thinking about what that system is, its function, its structure, how it works, essentially, is what's not working here. So that's that. It's the systemic nature of the system that's creating the emergence of this challenge we experience, right? It's if we go to climate change again, it's not one part of our economy that's emitting CO2. It's not just you know, shipping or airlines or something. It's our entire industrial infrastructure that we've built out over the past number of decades. That's systemic, as opposed to something else like, if you remember the ozone there, we used to have a hole back in the 80s or 90s, and we identified that CFCs were causing that, or a big part of it, and we identified who emitted that. There are a number of kind of sources, and it was quite easy to actually, that was one part of the economy. It wasn't all of us, it wasn't every aspect of our economy that was emitting those CFCs and causing the problem. So actually we managed to regulate that, and we managed to control it, and we managed to use traditional approaches to try and tackle and solve that problem, because it wasn't actually systemic. And climate change is different, it's systemic, and that's why we really struggle with it. And that's why we need systems thinking, right? That's what this module is about. We need systems thinking because these issues are systemic, and we need to be thinking on that level, which unfortunately is not what we're normally doing. We're normally doing a lot of this. This is what we're good at, reductionism. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that term. We'll be covering it in a future module, just to elaborate exactly what it is at that stage. But this is more traditionally how we see the world. There's a complex reality out there, and we try to reduce it down. That's reductionism. We reduce a complex phenomena down to an individual part of that overall complex system. And we try to ascribe properties and features of the whole to the part. By that, I mean, if there's some problem with the whole system, we'll try and trace that back to an individual part of the system. So there's a problem with our healthcare system or our political system or whatever it is. We usually try and find the cause of that problem, one or two causes of that problem, And then we say that's the problem, right? We need to fix those. We need to change the president because that's what's wrong with our political system. Climate change, you know, it's all about carbon. We have this carbon, I don't know if you've seen it, this carbon, the graphic of carbon tunnel vision. Climate change is a complex phenomenon, many dimensions to that, but we often reduce it down to CO2 emissions, and then we reduce the whole kind of equation down to governments having to regulate and reduce carbon emissions. So that's reductionism. We reduce down a complex phenomena to its individual parts. Unfortunately, it doesn't work. We essentially go around in circles if you take that approach, right? You have a complex system and it's dysfunctional, as I said, systemically dysfunctional. And that creates a problem, and you focus on that problem because you're using reductionism, and you try and fix that problem, and you may temporarily fix that problem as it's appearing. But then a couple of years later, problem will reemerge, whether in the same place or whether in another place, because it's the system, right? The system's going to stay creating problems if there's this systemic dysfunctionality. So it's essentially to say quick fixes don't work. And if we want real solutions, if we want to live in a really sustainable world, we're going to need a different approach. So if we really want to move towards a more sustainable world, we're going to have to address systemic issues rather than always reducing the problems down to one part of the system and looking for solutions to that problem. So this is what we're trying to do, shift from a reductionist approach, which is very good for simpler problems. So it's important if we have simpler problems. It's important in some contexts, but it doesn't work. It fails us when we have complex issues. So we're trying to move to that kind of right-hand side when we're dealing with complex sustainability issues, a systemic, holistic systems approach. And that's the essence of what we're getting at in this course. And how do we do that, both in terms of thinking and organizing and so forth, so that we can really address systemic issues and actually make sustainable progress, should we say. So that's that. It's just to pick up on a number of other things as to why this is so relevant in the context of sustainability. And you've probably heard of this word, unintended consequences. Reductionist thinking, as it reduces us down, reduces our vision down. We only focus on our little part of the system, and then it makes it very easy for our actions, if we're not aware of their broader effects, for those actions to have unintended consequences. We optimize our part of the system, but that actually results in sub-optimization of other parts because we have these negative externalities, as we call them these days, unintended consequences. So we're trying to shift to a more holistic view so that we can actually see the consequences of our actions. We don't have these unintended consequences, and we can start to build systems that actually work for everyone. So just to give an example, say in design, a lot of designers now are thinking about, well, how can we design for sustainability? And we know that a lot of how we design and develop products and services is actually very unsustainable. It's not circular, and it's not really addressing the bigger issues, should we say, in the world. It's creating a lot of unintended consequences, to use that word, and negative externalities, because we're just focusing on what's viable and feasible and desirable for our organization and the consumer. We're not looking at that bigger picture you can see on the right there. If we wanted a kind of sustainable design, it'd be a more systems design where we're thinking about those externalities and designing for those, so that we're actually considering the broader system. And finally, it's about systems change, being able to change systems, not just, we do need a broader awareness. We'll be talking a lot about that because it's very important so that we can grasp and respond to the broader system, but we also need to be able to actually organize and change, do a different kind of change that we call systems change. So this is Greta Thunberg, who's kind of touching upon that point. If solutions within the system are so impossible to find, then maybe we should change the system itself. So this is the new language of systems change. Maybe you've heard about. We're asking, how can we move from changing in parts, which is a lot of what we do. When we have an energy transition to make, we try to change lots of light bulbs and lots of, solar panels and electric cars and so forth, but we aren't actually thinking about the system and how to change the system. We're just thinking about changing the parts. So that's a different kind of change, comes from that different kind of awareness that we're talking about, systems thinking, but it's changing the system instead of the parts. And that becomes very relevant when you've really reached the end of the life cycle of the system you're dealing with at this time, or in the past you depend upon. We'd say the whole paradigm maybe in the systems language. So paradigm is a pattern of thinking or a pattern of organization. And we have developed, as we know, and we depend upon, almost all of us, industrial systems of organization they're based upon a certain way of thinking. They're also based upon a certain way of organizing and getting things done, should we say. And we may identify that those are kind of coming to the end of their life cycle. We need to actually change that whole system, not just change any of the parts. So when systems have reached the end of their life cycle, incremental change within the existing paradigm is not going to help us. We will need a paradigm shift, which is a change in the whole way the system is organized and its fundamental principles, which is not easy. We're really struggling with this, to be honest, I would say. And we struggle with it a lot because we haven't got the conceptual tools to do it. We haven't really learned about the methodologies and so forth to be able to enable people to come together and change the system they form part of, which is definitely needed in this context. So that's also going to be a big part of what we're talking about in this course and why this is of relevance to us. So it's about paradigm shifts. Systems thinking is going to help us get outside the box we're already in. It's not going to help us very much for incremental improvements within what exists. It's going to help us rethink the entire box, should we say, the paradigm of how we're doing things. So to get these paradigm shifts, we need to be looking outside of what exists, looking at the whole system and thinking about how it needs to change and be reorganized. And we'll definitely need systems thinking for that. So there we go. That's the end of this module where we've been talking about why we need systems thinking. It's for us to change our way of thinking, so we move away from focusing on parts and fixing parts and start looking at and being aware of systems. And when we do that, we can start to be more aware of consequences of our actions, unintended consequences we're creating, and start to design and develop systems that mitigate or take account for those, and in so doing start to build systems that work for everyone, including the planet. And then finally, as we talked about, it's this new capacity we need to be able to change systems. We need this new thinking to be able to do systems change, which is much needed.